This is the Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Rebecca Larson, and I am welcomed again by my dear friend, Sylvia Barbara Soberton. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello. Thank you for having me back, Rebecca.
Well, we had to finish our last conversation. The listeners and viewers have been clamoring to hear part 2 of the myths of the 6 wives. So here we go.
I'm looking forward to delve into it.
Yeah, we did the first 3 wives last time, and we ran out of time because there were so many myths. And now here we are with the last 3, and I feel like the first 3, especially Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, were at court for so much longer that there was a lot more to cover than maybe the last 3 are going to have. But we're going to do our best, aren't we?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so we ended the last episode with Jane Seymour, and we looked at, it was like her C-section myth. We looked at whether or not she was guilty of Anne's downfall, and we're going to start now with Anne of Cleves, who really had the shortest of all marriages to Henry VIII, didn't she?
Definitely, just 6 months record, even for Henry VIII.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much when it comes to Anne of Cleves that's unfair. And she didn't have the opportunity to really defend herself in history, or not in history, but with her contemporaries, but maybe more so now with historians looking at her and debunking some of these myths. So let's start out, of course, with the most common myth. To me, and then we'll kind of go through some of the other ones. But the most common myth to me is that she was ugly.
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, this myth is definitely stuck to Anne of Cleves, and we will probably never get rid of that. Because of course the topic of Anne's appearance is the hottest among historians. And this is because Henry VIII had discarded Anne after just 6 months of marriage because he famously just didn't like her. From the very moment that he saw Anne, he was determined to avoid their wedding and saying that he saw nothing in her as men reported of her. For example, when he asked one of his servants, the Admiral Sir John Russell, who saw Anne in Rochester Castle, he asked whether Anne was really so fair and of such beauty as it was reported, and Russell replied that she was not fair, but of brown complexion, and it really got me wondering, what was he trying to convey by that? But Henry VIII very famously fell in love with women who were not pale. For example, Anne Boleyn, we know that she had swarthy complexion, so olive skin. Jane Seymour was famously very pale, almost translucent. If we are to look at Holbein's great painting, one of the contemporaries also commented that Anne of Cleves was not as of such light complexion as Jane Seymour was. So obviously this was important to Henry VIII, but I don't think that this was the main reason. There is this huge myth, I think, that that Anne had smallpox scars on her face. And that's why Henry VIII was reminded about mortality when he looked at her and just couldn't take the smallpox scars. But you know what? The smallpox scars were pretty common in the 16th century, and they were very often remarked upon by contemporaries. And I have never seen a contemporary reference to Anne's face in that context. Nobody ever mentioned that she had smallpox scars, or even her complexion wasn't that often talked about. If you look at Holbein's painting of Anne now in the Louvre Museum, you will see that he conveyed her skin. He recorded it very with great detail, and you can even see the small veins on her temples. And there is really no sign of any blemishes to her face. So I think she did not have smallpox scars. I'm yet to see a primary source that says so. The only contemporary criticism leveled against Anne was that she looked about 30 years of age, and this is, mind you, according to the French ambassador, Charles de Marillac, who was not very happy to see Henry VIII married to someone else than a French bride.
Yeah.
As a side note, I'm just going to tell you that Henry VIII was really fixated on marrying Marie de Guise, who was very beautiful, and he fell in love with the descriptions of Marie. But she married James of Scotland, and Henry very famously, acidly commented that she married that beggarly beggar, the King of Scotland. That's probably my favorite 16th century insult from Henry VIII's mouth.
I love, and it's his own nephew that he's talking about when he said it's his sister's
And
son.
he famously hated him. He hated him so much, even more so after Marie married him.
Wow.
Yeah. So the French ambassador, we are returning to Anne of Cleves. The French ambassador, Marillac, says that Anne looked about 30 years of age. She was 24. That she was tall and thin, of medium beauty, and very assured and of resolute countenance. So face countenance. Edward Hall, the chronicler, was very enthusiastic about Anne, and he recorded that she was so fair a lady, of so goodly a stature, and so womanly a countenance. So again, face, And those are, the two contemporary ones. There is one from Eleanor, the Queen of France, who also commented that Anne looked older, and she was probably echoing the French ambassador's opinion, because she certainly read his reports. There is this one very important and very rarely quoted description from Nicander Nucius of Corfu, a Greek traveler who visited England in 1545 and wrote his account of his travels in classical Greek. And he recorded, and this is very important, and I think a lot of listeners will be actually surprised, that Anne was, and I quote, a masculine woman and of great beauty, end of quote. So I wonder whether all of those descriptions that we've heard suggest that she was, yes, tall, thin, perhaps of, this masculine woman, tall. Henry VIII famously, he didn't really like women who were not feminine. So he always had this, I would say, almost a type of a woman. And Anne of Cleves probably didn't visually aligned with that. The opinion among historians is that also their first meeting wasn't very successful, because Anne didn't recognize Henry VIII on a first sight. He came in disguised and hoped that she would recognize him, because this was part of this chivalric tradition of courtly love. And kings in the past had this habit of dressing up, pretending to be someone else for their brides to either notice them and know, oh, this is the king, or just to look at, the bride without her knowing. Famously, this happened to Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou, or more appropriately, this happened to Margaret of Anjou, because Henry VI dressed up, he pretended to be someone else. I think the messenger who brought news from the king, and she was reading the letter, and he just looked at her. She didn't know it was him.
It's not fair. It's not fair to these foreign women who don't know these things.
Yeah, I mean, Henry VIII also dressed up as Robin Hood, and he barged into Catherine of Aragon's chambers, and she always pretended to be amazed that, oh, this is Henry VIII, my husband. And Anne of Cleves, she didn't recognize him, and this was just an insult for Henry VIII, because she was supposed to know that he is Henry VIII by his kingly authority, the aura surrounding him of royal majesty. Yeah, I mean,
it's so typical Henry. He's like, I can't believe you didn't recognize me.
Yeah, exactly. And, I wonder whether Anne of Cleves knew what Henry VIII looked like, because Henry VIII there was not another man at court who looked like Henry VIII. Let's just say that. He was, grossly overweight at that point. He had problems with his legs. He was bald. He probably covered that with a hat. But I wonder if Anne knew what he looked like, or if maybe she was presented with a miniature or a portrait by Holbein, which was painted in 1536 and shows Henry VIII as this masculine, virile, the man's man, handsome, with his codpiece, accentuated. And if she saw that portrait and didn't recognize him, then that tells us a lot about how Henry VIII had changed from 1536 to 1539, 1540, when he met Anne of Cleves.
Yeah, it's so unfair to her. That story gets me every time, like the arrogance of Henry VIII to expect this foreign bride to recognize him. If you were born in England, maybe
you probably knew what Henry VIII looked like, especially if you lived at court.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were somebody, from the street, even from people at the streets didn't really know what Henry VIII looked like. They had, his image on groats and on coins, but, was that very reliable? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And, at that point, Henry VIII changed. He wasn't really that young, athletic man of his youth. He was, getting old, and he hated to admit that. He really thought about himself as this still young, still good looking.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact, that Anne didn't recognize him and he didn't like her. This brings us to another myth about Holbein and whether he idealized Anne's portrait.
Yeah.
Because modern historians have often repeated that Holbein idealized Anne and that she bore very little resemblance to his famous and recently also restored portrait. So the contemporary evidence doesn't support this view. For example, we know that the English ambassador, Nicholas Wotton, who saw Anne in person before her arrival in England, remarked that Holbein's paintings of Anne and of her sister Amelia, because Henry was about to pick from either Anne or Amelia. They were both unmarried at that point. And Wotton says that Holbein expressed their images very lively, suggesting a faithful likeness rather than flattery. And also the thing to know about Holbein is that he didn't really fall from royal favor after Anne's arrival. That further indicates to me, at least, that there was no perceived fault in his depiction of her. And if you look at other portraits by Holbein, you will see that he was very meticulous when it comes to the sitters. He records every imperfection, like wrinkles, warts, moles, little hair growing out of, I think, Lady Rich's a mole. So that's very, very, very detailed. Yeah. And I just don't see Holbein flattering Anne so much to the point that she was unrecognizable.
Yeah.
To Henry VIII.
Yeah. As much as we know about Holbein, and I feel like we know a lot more now than we did 10 years ago, there is no way he would have made her look different than she really did. That would have gotten him into a load of trouble.
Yeah. That's right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I want to talk about another myth that Dr. James Taft brought up when I had him on when his new book came out. And that was that Anne smelled. Oh. And this is one that I feel like has persisted along with her being unattractive, right? That Henry VIII famously said that she didn't smell good, or I don't remember exactly.
Well, he said that there were some displeasing airs about her, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And I think Henry VIII was just trying to really humiliate Anne and indicate that he wasn't able to have an erection with her, that she was this unattractive young woman who just failed to arouse him sexually. That's again Henry VIII placing the blame on a woman. And I think that we, as historians, relied for far too long on Henry VIII's version of events. And there are actually two versions of events when it comes to the marriage between Henry and Anne, because the common narrative, the most popular part of the narrative, is that their marriage was never consummated because Henry VIII said so, and his physicians confirmed that.
Yeah.
And the other side of the story is that Anne of Cleves claimed that the marriage was consummated. And how do we know that? There are those letters between Karl Harst, who was the ambassador, German ambassador at the English court. He was writing letters to William, Duke of Cleves, Anne of Cleves' brother. And he was, of course, informing him about everything that was happening at the Tudor court. And of course, William was very interested in why Henry VIII repudiated his sister, because that was a huge humiliation and a breach of the alliance between the two countries. And it's interesting that Anne of Cleves often confided in Harst. And according to Harst, she told him that the marriage was consummated, that at some point she even wondered whether she was pregnant or not. So it's very interesting that we have another side of the story. But of course, we know that Anne of Cleves agreed for the annulment of her marriage to Henry VIII. She was very much afraid, and then again, Harst is our informant here, that she would end up like one of Henry VIII's previous wives, so like Catherine of Aragon, banished, or even like Anne Boleyn, executed. But she was pretty vocal when she talked to Harst that the marriage was consummated. And, Harst was this kind of very open about how he felt about all of this. And at some point, and I applauded him from across the centuries, when he said to Henry VIII's counselors, and I'll paraphrase that, of course, who do you think Anne of Cleves is? A prostitute that she came here for 6 months and Henry VIII now invalidates the marriage? And I thought that was so brilliant on his part to just tell the truth as it is.
Yeah.
And it's also really interesting that he had very low opinion of Henry VIII. He said, well, obviously, Henry VIII doesn't care about his soul, about the damnation of his soul, because he swears on the oath that the marriage was never consummated. So at this point, we have to make our decision if we believe Henry VIII, that the marriage was never consummated, or Karl Harst and his opinion, his dispatches that he was writing to William of Cleves. And I think everybody had a stake here. Everybody was trying to win something out of the situation. Henry VIII was, of course, trying to annul his marriage, remarry to Katheryn Howard. He was already having someone aside. He was already having a mistress, Katheryn Howard. And of course, Anne of Cleves knew about it. And Anne, what was her stake in this? Well, she didn't want it to be humiliated on the international scene of Europe. Imagine this young girl comes to England to be married, just 24 years old, and she's repudiated by Henry VIII, of all people. He was King of England, but he was just a man who perhaps didn't look his best, and he claimed all of those horrible things about her, that she didn't arouse him sexually, she smelled. Can you imagine the audacity? I think it's the time that we stop as historians, especially as female historians, to believe the male narrative. Let's look at both sides. And I also have to shout out here to Heather Darcy, of course, and Nicole Bertson, who translated those letters and who highlighted and illuminated this part of the history for us.
Yeah. Heather's book definitely showed us a different perspective on the Anne of Cleves story that we hadn't seen before. And it's great. I think it's wonderful for us to be able to see maybe where the truth lies. I think there is no doubt, and I don't know, maybe I'll see if you agree with me, but I feel like there is no doubt that Henry VIII was a narcissist and that he would look for any way to blame anything on one of his wives.
I totally agree. I think if you look at Henry VIII's history, he always got what he wanted. There was not a single thing that he never got. He wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah.
There you go. He wanted to execute Anne Boleyn, get rid of her, just terminate the marriage. It happens. So whatever he wanted, he always got.
Yeah. And I have experience with the narcissist, so I know how they deflect anything that they see wrong in themselves, they deflect on the person closest to him. He called her ugly. Really, he probably felt ugly. He said she smelled. We know he smelled. So he just deflected. And I do want to come back to that smell thing because I want to let everybody know that Dr. James Taft said, yeah, maybe she did smell different because she came from a different country who used different perfumes and different herbs. And so maybe that's what he meant by the strange airs about her is just she's from a foreign land.
Yeah,
No
I
more.
mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, people did use scented fragrances, so maybe. Yeah.
It's possible. One of the things that we haven't covered yet, and I know this was something that Heather Darcy covered in her book too, was Anne's birth date. Because for a very, very long time, we were told it was one date, and then we come to discover that maybe it's a different date. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, so the widely accepted date is the 22nd of September 1515 of Anne's birthday. But Heather Darcy actually studied the German chronicles where it says that Anne was born on the 15th of June of 1515. It's still the same year, so it doesn't really change our perspective of Anne's age that much. But it's still interesting that we have this date, 15th of June, recorded in a German chronicle by a chronicler who was probably recording the correct date because Anne of Cleves's father was a duke and he was important and his children were his heirs. So their birthdays were important. And it's interesting that this date of the 22nd September, which can be traced to, I think, if I remember correctly, to the 18th century. So it's not even contemporary with Anne. Again, it doesn't really change the perception that much, but it really shows the importance of returning to the primary sources.
Yeah, it really does. Anne of Cleves.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that we have the birth dates for two of Henry VIII's wives. So for Anne of Cleves and for Catherine of Aragon, December 1485. We don't know when Anne Boleyn was born. We don't know when Jane Seymour was born exactly, Katherine Howard and Kateryn Parr. We know circa, but not really the exact dates. So at least with Anne of Cleves, we have her birth date.
Yeah, that says something about the importance of both of those wives.
Yeah.
Compared to his English brides.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Anne of Cleves. I feel like people are fascinated by her. When you and I started in the Tudors over 10 years ago now, I feel like she wasn't as popular then as she is now because people want to know more about her. The episodes that I do on Anne of Cleves are some of the most popular ones now. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. She wasn't that popular some years ago, but now it's like boom.
Everywhere.
Everyone wants a piece of Anne of Cleves. And it's really not that surprising because I think there's this collective feeling of sympathy for Anne of Cleves because she was this foreign bride from a foreign land. She comes to England and she's repudiated. And I can't imagine a more painful or humiliating way to be, I think, remembered in history because she was so much more than just Henry VIII's discarded bride. So much more. She was intelligent. She was probably also very well educated for her times. But one of the reasons that I've seen why Henry VIII also maybe didn't like her that much is that she wasn't she didn't know music. She didn't speak any other language than her own. She didn't know French, Latin. She didn't like poetry or, read that many books. And Henry VIII loved those things, and he sought similar things in his wives. So I think, that's probably one of the thing to add why he didn't feel attracted to her. But the reaction of people when he divorced her, annulled the marriage, because the divorce in modern sense didn't really exist, but the words were used interchangeably. The reaction was really interesting. Francis I, the French king, who married Eleanor of Austria, Charles V's sister, he didn't want to marry her. He had to marry her. And when he heard that Henry VIII divorced Anne of Cleves, said, "Mon Dieu, my God, he is divorcing her." Like, that was so unthinkable that Henry VIII could have divorced Anne of Cleves just because she didn't look like what he preferred, or he didn't like her. Although there is another alternative theory, I guess, that Henry VIII was pushed by political circumstance to divorce Anne of Cleves. But I personally think Henry VIII was so vain and so used to getting his own way that he really didn't like her on a personal level. He didn't want to be married to her. And I think he just didn't care if this means war or if this means the breach of the relationship with her brother, because he did that already. Remember, he did that with Catherine of Aragon. He didn't care about the war.
Yeah.
He didn't care about Charles V potentially invading England. He just wanted Anne Boleyn, and he got what he wanted.
Yes, he definitely did. And Anne then was saddled with the title, the king's beloved sister. And I always wondered, like, is that a good thing? Or would you rather be like just the ex-wife of the king, or would you want to be his sister?
Yeah, so the prevalent opinion among historians is that this title of the king's beloved sister, and let me just pause and say what this entails. She received like £4,000 of annual income. And if we put that in perspective, Anne Boleyn, when she became Marchioness of Pembroke, received £1,000 per year. And that was a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Anne of Cleves had £4,000 per year. She took precedence over all other women at court, so duchesses, countesses, marchionesses, except, of course, Henry VIII's queen and his two daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. So that was an important thing. And in a letter to her brother, she says, Henry VIII adopted me. She used that word, adopted me as his sister. And historians repeat that that's such a huge privilege for Anne. She was now the king's sister. And I strongly disagree with that. I think this thing means that Henry VIII it was his way of keeping her in check. So if she misbehaves, she is his sister. She is his subject now. He can punish her. And what could Anne possibly, why would she misbehave? She was, important person, wealthy, rich lady. But she wasn't very happy with the divorce. She had her supporters on the continent. There were works circulating about, allegedly written in Anne's voice by Anne, the Remonstrance of Anne of Cleves. So Henry VIII was afraid that she would start voicing her concern, that she would start talking. And who knows, maybe if she was bold enough, she would talk about that her marriage was consummated. So the king's beloved sister was Henry VIII's way of saying to her, I can punish you if I want. So do as I tell you to.
Yeah.
And, we have this evidence from Anne's household that people who served her opened her letters. They were spying on her. So she was not really as independent as we are led to believe. It was just Henry VIII's way of, saying, I'm keeping you in check, my lady.
Yeah, keeping her under his thumb, so to speak. Yeah, and you would think, when we think of Anne of Cleves, we always think like, oh, she probably enjoyed staying in England versus going back home and probably being married off to somebody else. And here she is in England, a wealthy woman now in her own right. She's got her own places to live. What's not to like about that?
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I have created the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready?
The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
I mean, I think that this comes from our perception of women in the 16th century because a woman could be independent when she was a widow, so a femme sole, she was this independent rich lady. But in Anne of Cleves's case, this situation was kind of forced on her. She was not married. She was, according to Henry VIII, she was never married to him. And the question was, would she remarry, and to whom if she would? And nobody in England wanted, to marry Henry VIII's former bride. That was too dangerous.
Yeah.
And so she was, I think, caught in this limbo, not really a queen, not really, a duchess or, I think she was very uncomfortable with it, but she tried to make the best of the situation. And when she arrived, for example, for Christmas festivities in December 1540, when Henry VIII was already married to Katheryn Howard, she was really, she was really good. She was showing deference to Katherine Howard. She was having fun, dancing, receiving gifts, giving gifts. And it was so strange for people who observed that, because those 2 women who were queen at some point, Katherine Howard, the new queen, the teenager, and Anne of Cleves, the repudiated one. Yeah. That was bizarre.
I can only imagine. And
it really, I think it really also shows us how intelligent Anne of Cleves was, because I don't know how I would react. Henry VIII divorces you. He invites you to a party with his new wife.
His new young wife. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's so gracious and so well-mannered, and people just admire her for her, the way she behaves.
Yeah.
So it really tells us volumes about how intelligent she was, how, how well she navigated the new situation and the courtly intrigues and things like that.
I think it's so interesting that he was married to her the shortest amount of time, but we clearly had the most myths to debunk with her. And I find that it's just interesting how history is written, right? And
well, you know what? This conversation really makes me to want write a book about Anne of Cleves.
Oh, well, you definitely should. I think and look into her portraiture too, because she had some great portraits painted of her.
Just 6 months, but how many portraits? I can think of about 4. Maybe there are more. But just 6 months as Henry VIII's queen and so many portraits. That's interesting.
Yeah, I want you to write a book on her. That's your next project.
Okay. Challenge accepted.
Let's move on to the woman who married Henry VIII next. And I always feel like I never know if I should use the term woman or not when it comes to Katheryn Howard. I feel like there are so many labels that are placed on her. She was naive. She was stupid. She was a slut. She was promiscuous. All of those things. Why do we keep saying that she was dumb or that she was stupid? I don't understand.
I think it's because history for far too long has been written by men, by older men at that, who unfortunately use those epithets in connection to Katheryn Howard. Of course, she was very young. I don't know if we can call her a woman. I think the most appropriate term would be teenager, because although we don't know when she was born exactly, we have two contemporary opinions. One is from Charles de Marillac, who believed that she was 18. He knew her, he saw her, he talked to her. He had Norfolk, the third Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Howard, Catherine's uncle, as his informant. So he was probably right when he said that she was 18, about 18. Another contemporary, near contemporary source, the Spanish Chronicle, says that she was 15. I think this anonymous author was trying to create shock in his readers that Henry VIII would have been able to marry a girl as young as 15, and he was almost 50.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, and so I think she was about 18, maybe slightly younger, maybe slightly older. I think, and that's my opinion, that she was not older than 20 when she was executed. So she was really a very, very, very young girl who, mind you, was thrown into court. When she arrived, she had no experience. She came as maid of honor to Anne of Cleves.
Mhm.
And she was very happy about becoming a maid of honor at court. There is this record of her saying that everybody who knew me knew how happy I was to come to court and serve the queen. And, she was serving Anne just 6 months. And then Henry VIII fell in love with her and, decided, you're going to be my wife. And what was she to do, really? Refuse? We know how that happened. Even if you refused the king, he would find a way to ensnare you. We know because Anne Boleyn was in that situation. She refused. She didn't want to have sex with the king. And still, he found a way to marry her, to get her. So the same thing would have happened to Katheryn Howard, I think. And, she was very young, and she was probably naive in many ways, because she didn't know how the court worked. And the people who knew said that the court was full of backstabbers, full of intrigue, gossip. And the young girl, even if she was 18, she was still probably not used to all of that.
Imagine.
And she became from maid of honor to a queen. And I was thinking about that quite a lot, actually, because if you look at the ages of Henry VIII's wives when they married him, they were all older than Katheryn Howard. Catherine of Aragon was about 23 when Henry VIII married her. Henry was 17 to her 23, younger. Anne of Cleves. Anne Boleyn was in her early 20s, although we don't know when she was born, but probably early 20s. Jane Seymour, mid-20s to late 20s. Anne of Cleves, 24. Katheryn Howard, very young teenager. And Kateryn Parr in her early 30s. So she was really the youngest bride of Henry VIII. That's really interesting. And of course, with Katheryn Howard, Henry VIII felt like he was young again.
Yeah.
He had this new mode of living. Charles de Marillac tells us, really, the Marillac is the Chapuis of Henry VIII's later reign. He also had a good eye for details. He was sharp-witted. He sometimes made those really interesting, funny comments. He was really good. I really like when ambassadors' intelligence and his wit shines through the dispatches. So with Marillac, we have all of that, and he says, Henry VIII has this new mode of living. He wakes up at 5, and he's dieting. He's doing some sports, and it's very interesting that Henry needed to do that because she was so much younger than him.
Yeah,
and he probably felt like his younger self with her. And with Katheryn, it's really difficult to get the sense of who she really was as a person, because she was queen briefly, and then this whole adultery thing happens. She's executed, and we remember her as adulteress.
Unfairly, yes.
Unfairly, yeah. Because, and I think that this is a common myth, that she committed adultery with Thomas Culpeper. But both Katheryn and Culpeper denied that adultery took place between them. Katheryn, for example, denied upon her oath, and I assume that she had maybe a Bible to swear, that she, if she denied upon her oath, and that's a quote from a primary source, then this was probably a thing of great importance to her. And Culpeper also said, well, the only bare part of her body that I touched was her hand. And he also said that he intended to have sex with her, and that was enough, because if he committed treason in his own thoughts, in Henry VIII, England, you could commit treason by just thinking about things like that. Henry VIII's death, sex with the Queen, you name it. And he said he intended to have sex with Katheryn. And so it was assumed that maybe they committed adultery, but she wasn't convicted of adultery. There is this great quote from one of the letter writers who was writing in May 1542, who said that the Queen was executed on great suspicion of adultery, so not really of adultery. And that's a huge difference, because in popular imagination she's an adulteress, and we just don't know what she was doing with Culpeper. I think maybe their relationship was not yet consummated. Maybe they had sex and were just desperate to deny it, because the outcome would have been very dangerous for the both of them.
Yeah, I think the big question is, what was the definition of adultery in the 16th century? I mean, if they were emotionally adulterous, clearly she had strong feelings for Culpeper, right? Her letter makes it seem as such. Whether or not they slept together, I feel like that's one of those things we'll never know.
People were very religious back then, and they read the Bible. And in the Bible, Jesus says that if a man looks at a woman and he feels lust for her, he had already committed adultery in his heart. And I think the same thing applies to women as well. So, it's open questions that will never be probably answered.
Do you think that's why people call Katheryn Howard stupid?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Because she had all of those meetings with Culpeper. And, we know that Anne Boleyn was executed, and we know that she was executed probably on trumped-up charges, that she was innocent. And what was Katheryn Howard really thinking when she was meeting with Culpeper? Yeah. But what was she really doing with him? Was she having sex? Did they just talk? I mean, the lengths that she went, the trouble that she went with just arranging all those, and of course, instrumental in arranging the meetings was Jane Boleyn, Katheryn's chief lady in waiting, about whom I wrote my recent book. And again, what was she thinking? Arranging all of those meetings. But then again, none of Anne Boleyn's ladies in waiting was executed. And I think that Katheryn Howard really hoped that Henry VIII loved her so much, because he was really besotted with her, that whatever people say or whatever happens, if it comes to light, he would forgive her.
Yeah.
And she could always deny. So I think she didn't really think that it would end like this for her. Maybe it sounded impossible to have another queen executed for the same thing, for adultery. Maybe she was thinking, well, what are the odds that Henry VIII would execute his second wife for adultery? Are you kidding me? I think she maybe thought like that. But of course, we will never know. And at least I think we owe her to tell her story correctly.
I agree.
Without the epithets like stupid, silly, adulteress. Those are, opinions, and we don't have this documented. And she was, she was very young, and this has to be acknowledged as well. She was just a teenager marrying the king who could have been her father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God. And I so wish we had a portrait of her.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we do. Maybe she's one of the faces from existing Holbein's sketches and portraits. We just don't know that we are looking at her.
Yeah, she's staring at us going, I'm right here, guys.
I'm right here.
You just have to look a little bit harder and you'll find me. I really hope in my lifetime that we figure out what she actually looked like. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a Holbein sketch identified as her?
Well, we do have this miniature in the royal collection that is described as possibly Katheryn Howard, and it was really believed very strongly in the past that it is Katheryn Howard. But we don't really have any firm evidence that this is her.
Right.
One of the reasons why people believe it's her is that she has what many call the consort's necklace, that the same necklace appears in Jane Seymour's portrait, in Kateryn Parr's portrait. But in Secrets of the Tudor Portraits, I argue that this is not a consort's necklace. This is just a necklace, a very popular design in 16th century, not only in England, but also in other countries. And so it isn't necessarily a consort's necklace, just a necklace. And any lady from the Tudor court could have worn something like that, emulating the queen, just trying to be fashionable. And,
it just would have had to be a woman who was wealthy enough to have her portrait painted, which still leaves a long list of women that
a lot of people were wealthy and could have afforded that, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we run out of time, man, we were worried we weren't going to have enough material to go.
And look at us. I knew it will happen.
Like I said, Anne of Cleves had far more myths than I think we would have expected. So we have to move on to Kateryn Parr, who I love, obviously, because of Thomas Seymour, but I just think she is a fascinating woman. Let's start off with the myth about her first marriage. And I feel like this is one that we don't talk about very often.
Yeah. So one of the very enduring myths about Katheryn is that her first husband was much older and mentally unstable. And again, this is something that comes from the 19th century writers. I traced it to Agnes Strickland. I'm not sure if there are, not surprising, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there are some earlier writers who were writing about that, but I came up with Agnes Strickland. It's always Agnes Strickland.
It is.
Always. And she says, yes, that her husband was older and that he already had children. And the thing is that Katheryn Parr was married to Edward Borough, who was approximately the same age as she was, and he died young around 1533. And they had no children. And so if he succeeded his father, he would have been a baron, and Katheryn would be a baroness of Borough. But he, of course, died young and never held the title, and they didn't have children. So yeah. That's Katheryn Parr's first husband, Edward Borough, not the older one, not mentally unstable.
Yeah, all of her marriages to me are so fascinating, and then her marriage to Lord Latimer and becoming a stepmother. And it's one of those things I've always wanted to find answers to, is whether or not she was ever pregnant by him. To me, that would... I don't, it just, they made it seem like such a big deal when she got pregnant by Thomas Seymour, but I wonder.
Yeah, we will probably never know because those things were rarely recorded.
Yeah.
If she was pregnant, maybe she had a stillbirth, maybe she had miscarriages, we just don't know. And she wasn't that important at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So her marriage to Lord Latimer, I always forget what his first name was, but it doesn't matter right now because we're not talking about him. But he was ill at the end of his life, and they had come to London basically to seek help. And one of the things that I've seen written before, and I want to say it was Susan James's book on Katheryn Parr, was that Katheryn was a lady in waiting or some type of servant to Princess
Yeah.
Mary or Lady Mary at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is often stated that Henry VIII noticed Katherine Parr and fell in love with her when she was serving his daughter, because that fits his pattern. He always fell in love with his wife's maid of honor or lady in waiting. And I just haven't seen any firm evidence of that in the primary source material. So probably they met and fell in love in some other circumstance, not necessarily that Katherine Parr served Lady Mary.
You know, I often wonder, and this is just speculation, I have no evidence to back this up, but I often do wonder whether or not Henry witnessed Katheryn with Thomas. Or I know the Seymour brothers had a relationship with William Parr, at least. So they were in the same circles. They would have probably been hanging out together, and however you hang out in the 16th century, it's not like we do today. But I wouldn't be surprised if Henry VIII saw Thomas Seymour, his brother-in-law, so to speak, and maybe Thomas's infatuation with Katheryn Parr at the time and thought, whoa, oh, wait a minute. I see that pretty lady over there. She's recently widowed and is available. She dresses really nice. I hear she's very religious and very intelligent. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't put it past Henry VIII to want what he couldn't have, to want what Thomas Seymour, one of the most attractive, charismatic men at court, could have. Henry wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because if you look at Anne Boleyn and how that old romance played out, George Cavendish wrote that Anne was, betrothed to Henry Percy, the heir to the Earl of Northumberland, and that Henry VIII ordered Wolsey to break up that engagement because he wanted Anne for himself. So how truthful that is, whether they broke up before or after, and why? Because he wanted Anne, or because the Earl of Northumberland didn't want Anne to become his daughter-in-law? We don't know, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, we'll never know. We'll never know for certain some of these historical. I always say
so many questions.
I know. I always say if I could just go back in time for a day or two, but then the more I think about it, the more I probably really don't want to.
If I only would do it if I traveled for one day and knew that I'm coming back.
Yes, yeah.
Because if I knew that I'm staying there, I would not set my foot in the time machine. Never.
I know. I think
don't do that to me.
I think about when I went to England, and this was the first time that, other than going to Canada, this was the first time that I had left the US. And I went to England, and it was so different than living in the US. There were luxuries that we have here that they don't have there. There were things I couldn't get there that we have here. And I remember thinking, like, man, how different it is. Imagine now going back to the 16th century in a world where nothing is familiar. You don't have electricity. You don't have the plumbing like we know it. You're drinking water, you're drinking wine and beer. There was no soda. The food that they ate was so different. I think a day is all that I could have handled. Maybe a few hours.
Maybe a few hours. And I'm going back.
I always joke about how when I went to England, I couldn't find Diet Mountain Dew there for the life of me. I searched and searched and searched, and I was like, how do they not have this? Like, I can't live without it. So that's why I say hours.
Okay.
Knowing that, and like you said, knowing that you can come back safely. Like you're gonna go back in time, but you're not.
Just take a look, quick peek at Anne Boleyn.
Maybe if you could just
Coronation Day, just let me look. Let me maybe meet her, greet her briefly, and I'm back on my way home.
Yes, and if you could just maybe even just be invisible. Nobody can see you. You're just invisible. And
Please, yes, because there was this danger that Henry VIII could notice you, and what then? You become the wife number 7 or what?
Yeah, I honestly,
you change history, Rebecca.
I know. I have the red hair, the blue eyes, the fair skin. He
You're
would have
definitely
been.
the type. I mean, look, red hair.
I know. Yeah, I'm not musical by any sense, but I could sure entertain him with my quick wit and my humor.
I know you would entertain him, yes.
He's like, ooh,
it's
look.
not too much. It's not too much.
Oh my gosh, Sylvia, these myths that we've gone through in the last episode and this one were definitely a lot of fun. I know people were enjoying listening to this, and I have to have you on more often. We have to come up with more reasons for you to come on
there will be reasons soon. So
yes, there will. We can't talk about it, but we have some exciting things that are coming up.
Yeah.
But other than that, I always want to give you the opportunity at the end of each interview to plug yourself and your books and where people can find them.
So the newest book that is coming out in May 2026 is entitled Mary Boleyn, the Queen's Slandered Sister, and it's a new biography of Mary Boleyn. And I'm very excited for this one because I've worked so hard on it for many, many years. So it's a product of at least 10 years, if not more, of research and of archival research as well. And I hope that the perception of Mary as the great and infamous whore will change once and for all, because I have some really great evidence that she was not great and infamous whore of legend. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can read more in the book. And of course, I will be talking about it on Rebecca's podcast in the future as well. So, watch this space.
I cannot wait. I have the book. I wish I had it out. It's behind me, sitting kind of on the shelf behind me. I cannot wait to dive into it. This is like one of those books when it arrives, I want to start reading it immediately, but I have so many interviews to do before this one that I'm like, I have to get through these other books. No offense to anybody else who I'm interviewing. But this is like one of those books like the Elizabeth Boleyn one where we've been waiting, this is something that we have been waiting for a long time to find out more of the truth about Mary, and I cannot wait to dive into it. And I want to give it the time and the energy that it deserves. I keep telling Sylvia, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a slow reader. I am a very slow reader. I wish I weren't, but I am.
Well, just take your time, take your time, pour yourself a cup of tea and just read it slowly, enjoy.
I cannot wait.
I hope that people will enjoy it, reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it.
I'm sure they will. Your books are always fantastic. And I want to give you an opportunity to plug your Substack too.
Mm-hmm. So I have a Substack blog, The Tudor Notes with Sylvia Barbara Soberton, where I post insights from my research, things that fascinate me, things that I love that come to my attention when I'm writing. So hopefully you will enjoy that. And maybe you could put up a link beneath this episode. Yeah.
Of course. I will put links in the show notes for everything. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for joining me again.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. It's always a great pleasure. I'm always having fun. And let's do it more often.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tudorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time.